So this is either a very late or a very early video. So apologies for those people who were looking out for my video at the usual time. Yesterday was stinking hot. Today's going to be even worse apparently. By the time I had put together all the clips I needed for this video, we'd reached the hottest part of the day, and unfortunately the aircon that I have here is so loud that I would have had to have turned it off to have recorded, which, while I'm happy to subject myself to that, there's no way I was going to put my dogs through half an hour to an hour of being so insanely hot that you can barely breathe. So I'm getting this done straight after breakfast because in Aussie terms we're headed up to 43 degrees today, which I think, well, it's well over 100. It's about 110 degrees if you're talking Fahrenheit. So we're headed for another really hot day today, so any recording that I have to do has to be done early before the temperature goes up. Anyway, let's get back to what we're talking about. So there's been a lot of debate about what might have happened with Maddie, and so many different theories being put out there. And I wanted to take a close look at that. So I've put together a bunch of clips. The majority of them come from Chris and Deb Stearns, who of course know their son better than most people. And I thought they might give us some notion of what actually occurred that night or early that morning. So let's jump in. The clips are in chronological order again, although I have started with Jenn and then I will move on to Chris and Deb. So let's jump in.
So what do you think happened Sunday, other than him killing her? What do you think made him snap?
I don't know. Theories, I keep hearing.
Tell me your theories, because here's the deal. We don't go home until she's found.
No, I know.
So what are your theories?
What I've heard is, what if she upset him and threatened to tell me and say that she was going to tell me, and he needed to shut that down.
So Jenn actually doesn't tell us her own theory. She says, I keep hearing the theory. She's not saying whether she believes this theory or not. She's saying this is what she's heard. She's heard this theory that Maddie was going to tell her and he had to shut it down. Now, I'm a little bit frustrated with the detectives for not pressuring her on this and saying, but is that what you believe? Because I would have liked to have known if that is what she believes occurred. Although I also suspect that she does actually know full well what occurred, and that perhaps this is her way of avoiding actually saying what happened. But it is plausible in that we know that Maddie was doing sex ed at school. So there were probably a lot of conversations happening about things that Maddie may not have realised, that may have made her start to question what was going on with Stefan. And it does seem quite likely that sooner or later a 13-year-old child is going to say, this isn't right, I don't want to do this anymore. Maddie was starting to become an adolescent. She was learning to speak up for herself. So maybe she did speak up for herself and say, this, no more, I don't want to do this anymore. Stop, or I'll tell my mother. So it's not a bad theory, but it's also Jenn not saying what she thinks or knows what happened. And honestly, to me, the fact that she's saying, this is what I've heard, to me that indicates that she is deliberately avoiding discussing her thoughts or her knowledge. Does she not want to incriminate herself for knowing precisely what happened? Does she not want to incriminate Stefan? Because at this point in time it seems like she's still trying to stand up for him.
Also, you asked me in the interview room about his triggers. I think triggers was like the wrong word to use because I couldn't think of triggers, but he does have a temper. Okay. He's very irritable and very negative about the world and things. Driving would piss him off. Like, depending on how people were driving around him, he'd get really irritable with that. Me nagging him would make him really irritable, like if I asked him to clean the house or help me with something. But,
So she's saying that he does have a temper, and she refers to him becoming irritable over multiple things, including her nagging at him. I would just like to say that simply Jenn's presence in the room would be enough to make me irritable. So I probably can't blame him for that. No, but on a more serious note, she's essentially telling us here that he's easily triggered. She's trying to play it down, but the fact that she gives a long list of things that make him irritable in her words, to me suggests that he is easily triggered.
Would he lash out and explode with me? No. But I believe he's done that with his parents.
Has he ever done it with Maddie?
Lashed out in front of us like that?
Or to her?
To her? No, I don't think so, no.
Now, she talks about him lashing out and exploding and saying that she believes he's done that with his parents before. That's really concerning. When I hear someone talk about someone lashing out and exploding, I think volatile, I think aggressive, I think reactive, in that they are not thinking about what they are doing, they are just automatically reacting. And that can have dire consequences. When he asks her, quite specifically, has he ever done that with Maddie, she switches it to lashed out in front of us. That's avoidance right there. She doesn't want to answer that question. And then he redirects her to Maddie, and she says, no, I don't think so. And then no again. Now we could say, okay, well, she's being emphatic there. She said no twice. But the fact that she's thrown in and I don't think so doesn't convince me that it hasn't occurred. When someone says I don't think so in accompaniment with no, that's not giving a affirmative, a concrete answer. So she's not saying that he's never done this with Maddie. It's possible that he has, and that she's just not going to tell them about it. I don't think so. is evasive language? I don't think so. It's possible that it may have happened. Usually that means that it has happened. She can't give them a definite answer here. And I could imagine this is a guy who feels like he has some sort of ownership over Maddie. And I could imagine him feeling quite comfortable with lashing out with Jenn and Maddie.
Has he ever got irritated or angry with her?
I would say yes, but like typical parenting stuff, like if she didn't clean her room when she was supposed to, like, you know, coming down on her for something like that. Was it like anger out of the blue or anger, like random anger? No. It was always like Maddie wasn't doing what she was supposed to be doing kind of thing, so we come down on her.
And when you say come down on her, obviously, do you mean discipline?
Yell at
Yell,
her.
okay.
Yeah, we would never hit her. We were never physical with her.
Okay.
We would just be like, you're supposed to be doing this, you're not doing this, what's going on? Are you spacing out? Are you being lazy? Get on it.
Now, I actually found it surprising that after that huge 10-second break before she answered, that Jenn came out with an affirmative. But I think she was trying to think of the most credible sounding answer. And to her, the most credible sounding answer is, well, he just, was like what you would expect from a step-parent. Can we just acknowledge here that even if he had been in their life for 7 years, he had not been living with them consistently. He had no right to discipline her like a parent. And if Jenn was truly allowing that, then shame on her. I can understand a relationship where perhaps a real step-parent has raised a child from when they were a baby, or has been present in their life for, the entire time that they've been growing up. Then I can appreciate that there does become a need for a younger child, that a step-parent will have some role in how that child is raised. But Stefan wasn't a step-parent. Stefan wasn't even a boyfriend. He should not have had any kind of access to Maddie in that sort of regards. But let's get real. Do you seriously think that he would give a damn if Maddie hadn't cleaned her room? He wouldn't even notice. And when you think about the way that someone who grooms a child acts, he would have been doing his best to pretend to be her best friend. So I highly doubt that he ever did any of that parenting kind of discipline. He would have, in fact, sided with Maddie behind the scenes over anything that Jenn did, to make himself the hero in the situation. He's not going to come at her over something like not cleaning her room, because he wants her to adore him. He wants her to still allow him to do the things he's doing. And if he can make himself more important to her than Jenn, that suits his needs perfectly. So he's going to step back and let Jenn discipline Maddie over having an untidy room. He's not going to yell at Maddie over an untidy room because that's going to spoil all his plans. He wants to be Maddie's best friend. To do that, he can't take a active parenting role in terms of telling her what to do. And in fact, we have his parents at one point saying he didn't do any of the parenting stuff. And I tend to believe them over Jenn. So, the other thing that she says here is that he doesn't react out of the blue with Maddie or have random anger. Now, given that we can't really believe the other stuff about him going off about Maddie not tidying her room and stuff, the fact that she's brought that up in the middle of it has got me really curious. Is that how he does act? Does he occasionally lash out, or did he occasionally lash out with Maddie? Or occasionally lash out with Jenn? Because, you know, they say you hurt the people that you are closest to.
You know,
He would
locked
have
himself
been
in his room, you know, wouldn't help us around the
more
house.
emotional.
And we were like on
Triggered
eggshells
by
because
Jenn.
when he was here, it was always tension
that
because of
household.
his sleep disorder and the dogs.
Than what
Obviously,
Jenn
not
is
the
trying to
quietest
say.
things in the
I
world.
suspect.
And, you know, they have their
I
routine,
may
we
be
have our
wrong.
routine, so we let them out in the evening
But
and it's chaos with them.
me,
Let them out in the
her
morning, it's chaos. But
introducing
for the most of the time, they're
notion
in feeding time,
of
they're
random anger
they're quiet.
relating to
But
Maddie,
again, that would disturb
come up
them,
with
didn't
this
want to
horrible
cause a
story
flare up with them.
about him
So when it would disturb
yelling at
him
her
with the
for
dogs,
not
was
putting
that
clothes away or
during the
whatever.
daytime or was him trying to
It
sleep
makes
at
me
night?
question.
Oh, it could be any time.
Oh, okay.
If anybody comes to the
I
door,
couldn't say, just from this statement,
get a package,
if I think
rat
that
farts
he's
in the
trying
yard,
to
could matter.
downplay things and that perhaps he's
So
done.
if he's sleeping during the day
did get
and we're doing our
randomly
daily
Maddie.
routine, you know, there's going to be
Let's
disturbance.
see
And
what
just
is
if I come in the house and go, hey, I'm home, you know, they'd be on part.
Right.
So, but
This last time he went up here, or to Kissimmee, did he say why he was going to Kissimmee?
her birthday,
Her birthday. Okay. Did he say he was invited to a party or anything like that? Or
I think he
Maddie
was
called and
asked
asked me
to
to please
come.
come.
and you heard
I-
Maddie call? Okay.
Yes.
And any idea, do you remember when that was? Because I know she had a party on Sunday. Do you know
Was
when?
it Saturday
I guess.
or was it?
To make sure he was coming.
Something odd on Saturday,
Right.
I don't know if was the invite on Saturday, or did he just say Sunday I'm going to Kissimmee?
No, we knew. I knew the week before because I found
Okay.
the gifts for Maddie.
Okay. He seemed to be very upset. Matter of fact, he came to me and said, "Do you have any anxiety medication?" I go, "No, sorry, don't have anything like that. Everything I have is for diabetes or heart." And then he went to Debbie and said, "I don't have any." And then he came back and said, "Well, I found some 4-year-old stuff." I said, "Oh, okay." But he was suffering from high anxiety, man. I don't know what he was stressed out about.
When was this?
Sometime in the evening. I don't know.
Oh, Saturday or
Saturday.
days prior to that?
Saturday.
Okay.
Yeah. And then he's making, and then I guess the medication worked, and again he looked like he was like very stressed out.
Have you ever seen him like that before?
Yes, when he was very stressed out. And it was like better tiptoe, not sure if he's going to blow up or not. You know, he seemed like he was calm enough, but you know, I didn't know if anything could trigger him or not.
Did it seem like he was more in fear of something or scared of something or just...
It was a different, other than, you know, being really upset about something. He looked like he was stressed out over something. Obviously, he never shared any of his feelings with us. And I had no idea it was stressing him out. But something really had him upset.
Angry upset, or just not that type of upset?
Not angry upset, but
Okay.
just something worrisome. Just seemed like there was something that was really preying on him, and it was not settling well with him.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Chris gives us so much information there. Now, one of the first things that is said is that Maddie did actually ring him on the Saturday. So they're establishing that he already knew about the party, sounds like from what Deb's saying, that he'd been invited to go up for Maddie's birthday a week earlier. And she gives a long story about the bracelet or necklace or whatever with the mermaid beads or whatever. But she establishes that he knew a week beforehand about Maddie's birthday. But they've both confirmed here that Maddie rang him on the Saturday. But then Chris is talking about Stefan's mood on the Saturday and him wanting essentially tablets to calm himself. And it sounds like he was in quite an escalated state. He talks about him being very upset and having high anxiety. And he also mentions that they felt that they needed to tiptoe because they weren't sure if he was going to blow up or not. Meaning that essentially when he's not happy about something, he can instantaneously become triggered. So what's all this telling us? First of all, to me it seems that there's something that was said when Maddie rang him on the Saturday. Whether it was her saying, yeah, you won't be able to go to my actual party, but I think that would have been understood given what we know about how much the family dislikes Stefan. Or perhaps it is connected to what so many people have debated, and perhaps Maddie was pregnant. Now I know that's a really triggering thing to discuss for people, but there's so many things that point towards it. Now I know that one creator has recently claimed that from listening to Maddie's best friend that Maddie did have her period at the end of January, meaning that she couldn't possibly have been pregnant. I'm going to put Jade's interview here on the channel so everyone can listen to it straight through without interruptions. And what you will hear that Jade said was that Maddie had got her period in January. She doesn't give a timeline for when she got her period in January. And we know from other interviews with Jenn that she should have got her period early February, which indicates that Maddie must have had her period early January, not late January as this other creator has speculated. So there is still nothing to confirm whether or not Maddie could have been pregnant. So it is a possibility. As much as we hate to think about it, it is a possibility. And there is a video that I did months ago where I looked at Stern's Reddit account and fitted it in with the timeline, where basically on the Saturday before Maddie's birthday, someone had posted on Reddit that they were pregnant and they were worried about it, and Stearns had responded to it. I'll put the link for that video below Because when you look at it in terms of the timeline, it is concerning. Especially when we hear this story of Stefan being extremely upset on the Saturday and him wanting medication to calm himself. But going back to what may have occurred with Maddie, to me, it's a big thing when they're talking about having to tiptoe around in case he's going to blow. To me, that suggests this is a person who can be easily triggered. If they're already in that sort of mindset, then it doesn't take much to make them blow.
I seriously don't know what he would have done if he'd had access to the house. But what he didn't realize is that when Chris leaves, this house gets locked up like Fort Worth.
Now, we know from all the records that have been released that Stefan did actually go into the house on the morning that he went to Northport. And I strongly suspect that Deb knew that. So, on the surface, you could say, well, what she's saying here is a deflection. Saying, I don't know what would have happened if he'd have got into the house. Indicating that she's afraid of him and that something bad may have happened to her, perhaps, had he entered the house. Now, we know, like I said, that he entered the house. So, this could just be, we could just brush it off as, well, she's just saying that to try and convince them that he definitely didn't get into the house. But what if there's just a little bit of truth in there too? And Deb is just a little bit scared of when her son blows up and loses his temper. To me, that would suggest, for starters, that she did not prevent him from getting in the house, because she would have been more afraid of his reaction had she tried to prevent him. But even though this story, to me, is intended to deflect from the notion that he actually did get into the house and to try and hide her knowledge of it, in my belief, I suspect there is possibly also a little bit of truth in there, and that she is anxious about those times when he blows, when he is triggered and he blows. And perhaps she is anxious about that occurring at some point in time when Chris is not in the house. Something worth considering. Even though in this instance we know that her saying, I don't know what would have happened had he gone into the house, is a load of BS, because he did get into the house. It certainly shows past history, if you ask me, that he has blown up at his parents.
How were his emotions as a kid?
Volatile, but also, I mean, even in kindergarten, before the accident, he didn't participate with the other kids a lot. He would rather go and make up his own game and do his own thing.
That's really telling. When she's asked about what he's like as a kid, and the first thing that comes out of her mouth is volatile. So this is someone who has had lifelong issues with anger. And I've seen people like that, where they can seem perfectly calm 1 minute and suddenly they snap. And whoa, you don't want to be in the room when that happens. So that's very concerning. Her talking about him being a loner at school, that may or may not be relevant, but quite often kids who are volatile, kids who can be explosive, tend to be loners at school because the other kids are scared of them and don't want to be around them. So they will quite often be shunned by the other kids. Could that have been the case? Well, we would only know if we were to hear that from other people who had been at school with Stefan.
And I am loud. When I'm frustrated, I yell. I don't scream. Somebody told us that I'm a screamer. I don't scream, I yell. If they want to hear a scream, I'll show them a scream. But,
She's Irish.
yes,
Do not upset the Irish.
I am Irish. I have an Irish temper. I go from 0 to blow real quick.
Okay, we've heard reference so many times to Stefan blowing up. And now we're talking about Deb and what she's like. And she says she's got a temper and that she can go from 0 to blow real quick. Is Stefan like her? Can he go from 0 to blow real quick? Because, face it, parents and children, quite often you see one parent where the child is so much like them in terms of temper, personality and stuff like that. I know if I were to think about me and my parents, I am very much like my dad was, and that is, I'm extremely laid back. I take everything in my stride, but if you push me and push me and push me, then I'm going to blow. And boy, am I going to blow. That's when you duck for cover. Because if you just keep pushing me to the point where I've had enough, that's when things blow. And that's exactly like what Dad was like. I can only remember probably one time as a child when he just lost his temper. Thankfully, my dad wasn't a violent man, so, there was nothing that came of it. But it's certainly something that sticks in mind with me, and I recognise that in myself. I've done that maybe half a dozen times in my life, but it's definitely something that I do share with my dad. So, is Stefan like his mother? I suspect so, because from what we are hearing, we hear people referring to him blowing up. They refer to him blowing up. So could her description also apply to Stefan? 0 to blow.
With him, it's you never know. It's like my mother. You never know when something's going to trigger him that reminds him of something he was mad at you before, and then he gets mad about that all over again.
So she's saying here, with him, you never know when he's going to be triggered. So she's saying that essentially what she's telling us here is there may be absolutely no warning signs before he gets triggered and just blows up. You're not going to see it coming. And those kinds of people can be the most dangerous people. I'm going to share a story now. I try not to share too much, give away too much about my personal life or who I am, but I'm going to share a story about a student that I had interactions with, and this student went from 0 to blow. Sitting at their desk totally calmly, another student just said something which most students would brush off. This student became so angry that he leapt up, he threw a chair. This was a 6 foot tall 14-year-old boy. I put myself between him and the other student to prevent him from throttling the other student, and I actually had to hold him back to keep him off the other student, and this child was so enraged that he essentially dragged me off my feet and through the door, going after the other child. That from sitting calmly at a desk. So when she says you never see it coming, that is a big red flag for me. That says that it could be that he does become volatile very, very quickly. And the things we're hearing do sound like he could go from appearing calm to becoming extremely volatile instantaneously.
There is another incident, and I don't think we've ever brought this up before, and that is in California. He was walking down the street with a couple of friends and his girlfriend, and this man was very inappropriate with them. And I'll let Chris tell you the rest of it, but
Well, yeah, cat call or something, and there's
lewd cat call.
there was a shout out to him, and the truck spun around and came back. This guy unfolded himself out of the truck. He was that big, and physically started assaulting Stefan to the point that he was choking him to death. Is coincidental to that, we had just come back from Sequoia National Forest where we went camping with the church group, and Stefan had a pocket knife in his pocket and stabbed the guy in the chest to defend himself. The guy was later arrested for physical assault, and Stefan defended himself. But
just to clarify, what was the trigger? What was the cause of that?
There was a very lewd remark made and a shout back to the guys. And it turns out the guy was a meth, but a shout out to the guys that went driving by in the truck, maybe an FU or what have you. And they spun around and
They
came
flipped
back.
the bird. They flipped the bird, and he spun the truck around and came after him.
And Stefan was the only one that was physically attacked. Karate or no karate, he couldn't get the guy off of him.
Now, when you listen to that story, you need to read between the lines, because according to Chris and Deb, Stefan was totally innocent in the whole situation. But if we take away all their excuses, and boy do they have excuses at every turn, according to them, none of it was his fault. But let's break it down into just the basic facts. Stefan was walking along the street with some of his friends. He was armed with a pocket knife. There was some altercation between somebody in a car and Stefan. There were things said by Stefan. And apparently he flipped the bird. What we're hearing here is that Stefan had a reaction. Stefan got angry at somebody over something. Someone in a car, someone much, much bigger than himself, and yet he was still unconcerned with the size and lost his cool, and he stabbed a person in the chest. That is more than self-defense. Note how in all this, Chris has this person unfolding himself out of the car. That is deliberately intended to give the impression that this person was the aggressor in the situation. They were so huge, they were a giant. And Stefan is this super brave teenage boy for taking on a giant. Bullcrap. What essentially has happened here, Stefan has mouthed off at someone to the point where that person was like, this weedy teenager needs to be taught a lesson. They've gotten out of their car. Stefan stabbed them. Given what we know about Stefan and his anger issues, I think the rest of the things that Deb and Chris are saying are excuses for Stefan. Is this the instance that we heard about where they made charges go away, or they made the whole situation go away because Stefan had done something wrong? Because, seriously, think about it. Most teens, in a situation like that, if someone big like that got out of a car, they would run. You have to be so fired up and angry to actually stand your ground against someone that big and to stab them with a knife. I don't buy that he was at church camp, so he had his pocket knife. I suspect that he always carried a knife. Don't forget that after he was arrested, Chris handed over a knife to police that Stefan had had on him and had given to Chris for safekeeping. Stefan carried a knife. I think they have seriously downplayed that entire situation, and I think that were it possible, obviously it's going to be sealed because he was underage, but were it possible to actually read accounts from that incident, I think the truth would be very, very different from what we've just heard.
And then he started experiencing some educational problems, and Debbie can relate to that. We had to put him into an individual education plan and what have you. And we finally realized that we needed to take him out of school and put him into a homeschool environment.
Okay, there is a second clip regarding this, which I'll play in a minute. But why do you pull a child out of school and homeschool them? Generally, that occurs if they have high anxiety issues related to perhaps autism or something like that. If they have a disability which makes it difficult for them to cope at school. If they are being bullied, or if they are being overly disruptive and the school has politely requested that you remove the child from the school. That usually is a last resort for the school when they have reached the point where that child is severely impacting on the education of other children and impacting on the mental well-being of teachers and impacting on the teacher's ability to actually teach. When I think about Stefan, I'm leaning towards the latter. This is a guy who, by their accounts, was a loner at school. I don't think he was being bullied because from what we're hearing here, he was the one who would blow up. Yes, there probably were kids who used to amuse themselves by stirring him until he blew up, but I don't think that would have been enough to have had him pulled out of school. And they're talking about the education side of it. So whatever it is we're talking about, in the classroom there was some sort of issue. Deb claims that he's super, super smart. So it wasn't a learning issue. So let's listen some more and see what else we can find out about this situation.
I feel like he got a better education at home than he got in school. He didn't have the distractions. He could concentrate on his work. He wasn't distracting the kids around him, and he wasn't frustrating the teachers.
He wasn't distracting the kids around him, and he wasn't frustrating the teachers. Now, I don't know about the capabilities of teachers in the United States, but most teachers can put up with a lot of crap before they become frustrated. The fact that she's referring to him as frustrating the teachers, to me, suggests that he was creating major issues in the classroom. And he was essentially hijacking the classroom, preventing the other students from learning, preventing the teachers from teaching. That to me says high level behaviours.
And I will also say he's a narcissist.
Okay.
It was all about Stefan. When Stefan wanted something, Stefan wanted it then. He didn't want to wait. He didn't want to wait for Christmas. He didn't want to wait for his birthday. It was now, and he would throw a fit.
Again, she's essentially referring to volatile behaviours. If he doesn't get his own way, he works himself up into a state where he throws a fit. Now, if she's referring to that as a child, that's probably harmless. But as an adult, throwing a fit, that is essentially them snapping, and that can become quite dangerous. So, goes back to the question, was there something he wanted from Maddie and she refused and he threw a fit?
It seemed like there was a disconnect. You know, you were like kind of this close, and all you needed to do is make this connection. And it's like,
John, he had no impulse control.
Yeah.
Really,
Okay.
if he wanted to do it, he did it. And then he paid the consequences later. He got put on restrictions. He had his car taken away. At one point, I went in and stripped his room of everything that he had because he had gone for 6 weeks without cleaning his room. And
So I actually thought at first when I heard this, when she started saying he has no impulse control to have done what he did, I thought she was immediately referring to Maddie. But then she's giving all these other instances which are inferring that they were a consequence of him having no impulse control. So she's essentially establishing here whether or not she was at first mentioning that she thinks that whatever happened to Maddie was a result of no impulse control. She's giving a history here of other times when he's demonstrated no impulse control. So this is hugely significant. Deb has basically told us Stefan doesn't know how to stop himself.
And he would have been roughly, what, like 19, 20 at that point when he applied for the Air Force?
18.
18?
18 straight out of high school.
Gotcha. Okay.
In fact, I took him to the recruitment office. I was.
Did you notice after he was rejected for that? Did you notice any changes in his demeanor?
Very depressed, and very angry. Angry
Okay.
which ended up being so minimal.
So they're talking about Stefan being rejected from joining the Air Force or Army or whatever it was, and him becoming very angry. It seems like every story that they tell about Stefan results in Stefan becoming very angry. They're talking about no impulse control. They're talking about him becoming very upset. Here they're talking about him becoming very angry. They're talking about tiptoeing around in case he blows. This guy has a history of when things aren't working out for him, his immediate response is to become very angry.
That Saturday evening, he was having some sort of anxiety panic attack, and I've never ever seen this expression on his face. Never. And something he had some sort of information and had no idea what it was, but he was really panicked.
So again, he's talking about there was something really triggering that occurred on the Saturday, and that he's never seen Stefan in the state that he was in. That's really alarming for me. That suggests that there was some sort of conversation between Stefan and Maddie, because we know that Maddie was also apparently extremely anxious on the Saturday. Now, we also know from Yolanda that Maddie had said she didn't want to go home. Maddie was really distraught, and that because of that, Juan took Maddie out for burgers rather than sending her home on the Saturday. So, for some reason, Maddie was extremely distraught. She didn't want to go home. And you have Stefan being in such a state that Chris has never seen him like that before. Are these important clues as to what happened with Maddie? Was there something significant that the pair of them knew? And did he blow up on the Sunday night when he was with Maddie? It certainly points to something of the sort.
I mean, Lauren, if it's, I pray to God that it was an accident, that he got mad and that it was an accident, because we didn't really had gone that far.
Sure.
Because he did tell us that he put her, she went to bed, and that when he went out to walk around and blow off some steam, he came back and to check on her, and she was cold. He said he discovered her. Okay, so.
Don't know if that's the truth.
Okay. That, to me, was one of the biggest things to have come out of all these interviews. She started saying he put her, and then changed it to she went to bed. But the thing that is really significant for me is that she says he then claims that he went to blow off steam. Now, if you are perfectly calm and relaxed, you don't need to go and blow off steam. You only need to go and blow off steam when you've lost your temper. So I think Deb is spot on here. From what she's saying, when you actually break it down, I think essentially, while he's tried to make it sound like he had nothing to do with it, Stefan has essentially admitted that he lost his temper and he did something to Maddie. To me, that sounds like an admission of guilt right there. He went to blow off steam and he came back and she was cold. So something occurred that made him really, really angry. So angry to the point where he has reacted and he had to leave the room and go and blow off steam. And then when he got back, she was cold. What does that tell you? It breaks my heart when I hear that. That is Stefan saying he killed Maddie. that is Stefan saying he lost his temper, he became angry, he did something. When he went back, Maddie was cold. Now, I'm going to play one more clip. And this clip is not discussing Stefan's temper. This clip is one which I actually didn't spot this myself. One of my subscribers drew this to my attention. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. So, this is the body-worn camera footage when they went to get more things from the apartment for the sniffer dogs. And they're having a conversation with Jenn about items of clothing. And she's talking about what Maddie was wearing when we last had her. And referring to the party dress. We know that she's referring to the party dress because even though the audio starts getting really bad there, you can tell from her hand gestures what she's talking about. While this interaction is going on, don't watch Jenn. Watch Stefan. Now, through most of the interviews, Stefan has his hands crossed in front of him. And throughout this whole discussion, for the most part, he has his hands crossed in front of him. But when Jenn is talking about when they last had Maddie, watch Stefan.
We're just gonna try to see if we could pull one more clothing for collecting of clothes, okay? That's okay with you guys? Yeah. We're gonna pull one more and then we're gonna have the dog sniff it out again and see if we could get another track going. Yeah. Alright?
Can I get you like the last outfit she was wearing?
Has it been like with other clothes and all that, like your clothes?
It got mixed in with clean clothes and dirty clothes.
What do you think?
Is it on the floor there in the bathroom? It's in the laundry basket.
Were the other clothes not good enough?
No. We just try to collect separate ones and then we separate all of them just in case one was contaminated. We have something else we can use without having to come and bother you guys. I was just thinking on Sunday, the last thing we had her. Sunday, she had a picture.
So they're talking about the last thing that they think Maddie was wearing. Jenn goes on to say the last time we had her. What is Stefan doing? Stefan has both his hands up around his neck. Stefan is doing a throttling, to use Jenn's word, gesture, on his own neck. He is doing a strangulation gesture on his own neck. This is all while they are talking about the last things that Maddie was wearing. So, throughout this video, we've heard repeated comments from Jenn, from Stefan's parents, about his anger issues, about his tendency to basically just snap and lose his temper, of his volatility. They mentioned a few times that he was volatile. When I hear someone is volatile, that makes me very nervous. Because volatile immediately brings to mind extreme reactions. We're talking deadly reactions. And then we have this instance where they're talking about Maddie when she was, the last time she was with them, or the last clothes she was wearing. And he's standing there with his hands around his neck. If I listen to all these clips, I can infer from these that Stefan lost his temper with Maddie. He blew up, and he did in fact strangle her. I believe from everything we've heard that what occurred to Maddie occurred because Stefan became volatile. Something occurred to make him really angry, and he couldn't stop himself. Now, before I end this video, I just want to point out something, and that is all the evidence points towards Stefan being responsible for Maddie's death. Not only that, there is a wealth of evidence that shows horrendous things that Stefan was doing to Maddie. I know that people have heard Deb's little story where she makes Jenn the evil villain that did everything, and people have run with that notion. But we have absolutely no evidence whatsoever of Jenn being the person responsible for Maddie's death. I think blame needs to be allocated to the person who deserves the blame. Yes, Jenn is culpable for sending her daughter upstairs with that monster, and that alone makes her nearly as evil as him. But to turn around and claim that she was the one who took Maddie's life, you're giving Stefan a free pass. Do you really want to do that? To me, everything in this video points quite strongly towards Stefan being responsible for Maddie no longer being here. Yes, Jenn is definitely culpable. She served her daughter up to a predator. Had she not sent Maddie upstairs with Stefan that night, Maddie would still be alive. Had she not allowed him all that access to Maddie, Maddie would still be alive. Jenn definitely deserves to be arrested. Jenn should be locked up. I also believe that at some point in time, Stefan told Jenn what had occurred, and I believe that Jenn helped cover for Stefan. But I think when we listen to all these comments about Stefan, particularly when we look at those last two clips, I think it is quite clear that Stefan was the one responsible for Maddie's death. Stefan became angry, Stefan reacted, and Maddie is no longer with us. This has been a really intensive video, so by all means go and hug your children, or if they live away from you, ring them up, talk to them, tell them you care. If you've got animals, hug them, let them comfort you. I know that sounds mushy, but this is a really hard topic to talk about. This beautiful girl had such a future ahead of her, and her mother destroyed that by allowing this predator full access to her. Her life was destroyed 7 years before her death, the first time that Jennifer Soto brought that monster into her world. And that's a hard thing to think about. So thanks for listening. If you're new to my channel, please subscribe. Also, Please hit the like button. I know it's not a topic to be liking, but like for Maddie. Let's get her story out there. By liking my video, you're getting it out into the algorithm. And please leave a comment below. Even if it's just leaving some love hearts for Maddie, go with that. But I look forward to reading your comments. And sometimes it helps to be able to just get it out and say what you need to say. So thanks, and I'll catch you in the next one.